Ambassador Minji adjusted her diplomatic uniform one last time as the shuttle descended toward Thyloris. The crystalline planet below sparkled like a massive jewel against the darkness of space. She had trained for this moment her entire career, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to see. "First contact protocols are active," announced Jiwoo from the seat beside her. The linguist had spent months learning the basic clicking sounds that made up the Thylorian language. Her translation device hung around her neck, humming softly as it processed the alien communication signals coming from the planet's surface. Security Chief Hyunwoo sat across from them, his eyes scanning the readouts on his tablet. "Their escort. Ships are maintaining formation. No hostile movements detected." Despite his calm voice, Minji could see the tension in his shoulders. They were about to meet an alien species that could either become humanity's greatest allies or most dangerous enemies. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad made entirely of what looked like living crystal. It pulsed with soft blue light that seemed to welcome them. Through the viewport, Minji could see the Thylorian palace rising before them like a mountain of pure light. The structure seemed to breathe, its walls shifting between different shades of gold and silver. "Remember, everyone," Minji said as they prepared to disembark. "We represent all of humanity today. Every word, every gesture matters." The airlock hissed open, and they stepped onto the alien world. The air tasted different, cleaner somehow, with a faint sweetness that reminded Minji of spring flowers. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth's, making each step feel like a small bounce. Waiting for them was a group of Thylorian escorts. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in what looked like natural armor that shifted colors in the light. Multiple arms moved in graceful patterns as they communicated through a combination of clicks and hand gestures. Jiwoo's translation device came to life. "Welcome, visitors from the distant star. The Queen awaits your presence in the Hall of First Meetings." They were led through corridors that defied human understanding of architecture. The walls curved impossibly, and the ceiling seemed to stretch infinitely upward. Bioluminescent plants provided light that never hurt their eyes, no matter how bright it became. Other Thylorians watched them pass. Some were smaller, clearly workers or servants, while others wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor. All of them moved with the same fluid grace, their multiple limbs working in perfect coordination. "This is incredible," whispered Jiwoo. "Their entire society seems to be built around collective harmony." Hyunwoo remained focused on potential threats, but even he couldn't hide his amazement at the alien architecture surrounding them. Finally, they entered the Hall of First Meetings. The room was vast, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars above through transparent crystal. In the center, on a throne that seemed to grow from the floor itself, sat Queen Velnara. She was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Standing, nearly 10 feet tall, her forearms moved independently as she observed the human delegation. Her compound eyes reflected the light like thousands of tiny mirrors, and when she spoke, her voice resonated through the chamber like music. "So," she said in perfect accented English that surprised everyone, "these are the humans we have heard so much about." Minji stepped forward, her heart pounding as she prepared to make humanity's first official contact with an alien ruler. Minji stepped forward and bowed respectfully, just as she had practiced countless times back on Earth. The formal words of greeting were ready on her lips, the carefully prepared speech that had been approved by dozens of committees and reviewed by every diplomatic expert humanity had to offer. "Your Majesty," she began, "on behalf of the people of Earth, I bring greetings and hopes for peaceful relations between our worlds." The Queen's compound eyes seemed to study every detail of Minji's face. The massive alien ruler remained seated on her living throne, and for a moment everything proceeded exactly as planned. The Thylorian court members stood in perfect formation around the hall, their multiple arms held in positions that Jiwoo had identified as respectful attention. Then something completely unexpected happened. Queen Velnara rose from her throne. The movement sent a ripple of surprise through her own court. Clearly this wasn't part of their normal ceremony either. She descended the steps slowly, her forearms moving in patterns that seemed almost nervous. With each step, She grew more imposing until she towered directly over Minji. Hyunwoo's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, but Minji caught his eye and shook her head slightly. Whatever was happening, drawing weapons would be the worst possible response. The Queen's voice, when she spoke, was different from before. Gone was the commanding tone she had used from her throne. Instead, she sounded almost uncertain. "Human," she said, the word coming out slowly as if she was tasting it. "I have question for you." Jiwoo's translation device remained silent. The Queen was speaking in English, though her accent made some words difficult to understand. "I watch your broadcasts," Queen Velnara continued, her four arms gesturing as she searched for words. "Your movies, your stories. I see how your people choose partners." The hall had become so quiet that Minji could hear her own heartbeat. Every Thylorian in the room seemed frozen, as if their queen was doing something that had never been done before. The Queen leaned down, bringing her massive head closer to Minji's level. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but in the silent hall, everyone could hear her clearly. "Would you marry someone like me, human?" The question hit Minji like a physical blow. This wasn't in any of the preparation materials. There were no protocols for this situation. No committee had ever considered what to do if an alien queen asked a human diplomat about marriage within the first 5 minutes of first contact. The silence stretched on. Minji could feel the eyes of both species watching her, waiting for her response. One wrong word could destroy humanity's first chance at alien alliance, but what was the right word? What could she possibly say? Jiwoo stood frozen, her translation device useless for a conversation that was already in English. Hyunwoo looked like he was ready to tackle the Queen if she made any sudden movements. Behind Queen Velnara, the Thylorian court members began making rapid clicking sounds among themselves. Their body language, even to human eyes, clearly showed shock and concern. Minji's diplomatic training finally kicked in. When faced with an impossible situation, buy time and gather information. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, "that's a very interesting question. Might I ask what prompted you to wonder about human marriage customs?" The Queen's compound eyes seemed to shimmer, and for just a moment, Minji thought she saw something almost vulnerable in that alien face. Back in the temporary human quarters that evening, Minji sat staring at her notes, trying to make sense of what had happened. The Queen's question kept replaying in her mind. She had managed to deflect it diplomatically during the ceremony, but she knew it would come up again. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Tae-hyung, the team's anthropologist, entered carrying a thick tablet loaded with research. "Data, I've been digging into Thylorian social structures," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "And I think I understand why everyone in that throne room looked so shocked today." Minji leaned forward. "Tell me, Thylorian queens don't choose their mates. Ever." Tae-hyung swiped through his data. "According to everything we've learned, their reproduction is handled entirely by the Council of Advisors. The Queen's only job is to rule and produce heirs with whoever the Council selects. So when she asked me about marriage, she was basically asking about something that's completely foreign to her entire species. It would be like if someone asked you what it's like to breathe underwater." Tae-hyung paused. "But here's the strange part. She knew enough about human customs to ask the question in the first place." Before Minji could respond, another knock came at the door. Seo-yun, their communications specialist, burst in looking excited and slightly worried at the same time. "You need to see this," she said, connecting her tablet to the room's display screen. "I've been monitoring their communication networks and I found something interesting." The screen lit up with data streams and signal patterns. "The Queen has been accessing our broadcast transmissions for months. Movies, television shows, news programs. She's been watching everything." Minji stared at the evidence. "She's been studying us." "Not just studying," Seo-yun corrected. "Look at this usage pattern. She's been particularly focused on romantic comedies and drama series, shows about relationships, marriages, dating. She's consumed hundreds of hours of content about human love and partnership." Tae-hyung whistled softly. "No wonder she asked that question. She's been learning about human relationships in secret." "But why in secret?" Minji wondered aloud. Their answer came the next morning during the scheduled cultural exchange session. The Thylorian delegation was led by Kixthan, the Queen's chief advisor. He was smaller than the Queen, but carried himself with obvious authority. His 4 arms moved in precise controlled gestures as he spoke. "We must discuss yesterday's irregularity," he said through Jiwoo's translation device. His tone was formal, but carried an edge of concern. "Of course," Minji replied diplomatically. "We're here to learn about each other's customs." Kixthan's compound eyes focused on her intently. The Queen's question was inappropriate by our standards. For 17 centuries, Thylorian rulers have followed the sacred traditions. The Queen does not choose. The Queen accepts what the Council decides is best for the species. Jiwoo shifted uncomfortably as she translated. The advisor's clicking sounds had become sharper, more aggressive. "We understand that different species have different customs," Minji said carefully. "The Queen has been influenced by alien concepts," Kixthan continued. "This is concerning to many of us. Her duty is to her people, not to strange ideas from distant worlds." The warning was clear, even through the translation. The Queen's interest in human customs was causing problems within her own government. "Perhaps," Minji suggested, "understanding different ways of thinking could benefit both our peoples." Kixthan's arms moved in what Taehyung later identified as a gesture of dismissal. "Some knowledge brings only chaos. The Queen must remember her place." As the advisor left, Minji realized they were caught in the middle of something much more complicated than a simple diplomatic exchange. The Queen's question hadn't just surprised the humans, it had challenged the very foundation of Thylorian society. 3 days after the awkward throne room encounter, Minji made a decision that would either advance human-Thylorian relations or destroy them completely. She submitted a formal request for private audiences with Queen Velnara, citing the need to better understand Thylorian culture for future diplomatic relations. The response came within hours. The Queen had agreed. Their first meeting took place in what the Thylorians called the Crystal Gardens. Minji had expected something like the Botanical Gardens back on Earth, but this was unlike anything she had ever seen. Living crystal formations grew from the ground like trees, each one humming with a different musical note. The combined effect created a symphony that seemed to respond to their footsteps. Queen Velnara walked beside her, moving with surprising grace for someone so large. Without the formal throne room setting, she seemed less intimidating and more curious. "Your people," the Queen said in her careful English, "they choose who to love." Minji nodded. "Yes. We believe that love should be based on personal connection, shared values, mutual respect. Even rulers, even those with responsibility for many lives, especially rulers, we've found that leaders who are happy in their personal lives often make better decisions for their people." The Queen stopped beside a particularly beautiful crystal formation that glowed soft purple in the alien sunlight. "This is difficult concept for my people. We believe duty comes before personal desires, but what if duty and personal desires could work together instead of against each other?" The Queen's compound eyes turned toward Minji. "You speak of impossible things." "Do I? You've been watching our broadcasts, learning about our ways. That suggests you don't think they're completely impossible." For the first time since they'd met, Queen Velnara seemed genuinely surprised. "You know about the broadcasts?" "We know. The question is why you've been so interested in our stories about love and relationships." The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her 4 arms moving in what Minji was beginning to recognize as a gesture of uncertainty. "In your stories," the Queen finally said, "people choose each other because of who they are inside, not because of duty or politics or what is expected. They see something in each other that others cannot see." "That's right. I wonder if someone very different, someone not human, could ever be chosen in such a way." Minji felt her heart skip. The Queen's original question was starting to make more sense. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Do-Yun was having a very different conversation. As the head of the diplomatic corps, he had been monitoring the mission's progress through daily reports. What he was reading concerned him greatly. "Private meetings," he said into his communication device, speaking directly to Minji across the vast distance of space. Ambassador, this is highly irregular. First contact protocols clearly state that all interactions should be witnessed and recorded. Minji's voice came back with a slight delay. The Queen specifically requested privacy. Refusing could damage our relationship with their entire species. And accepting could damage your career and our credibility. The board is asking questions. I can't answer. What exactly are you discussing in these private meetings? Cultural exchange, understanding their social structures, their history, their way of thinking. Minji, Do-hyun's voice carried a warning tone. I've known you for 10 years. I can hear when you're not telling me everything. What's really going on? There was a long pause before Minji responded. The Queen is questioning her own society's traditions. She's interested in human concepts of choice and self-determination. If we handle this correctly, it could lead to unprecedented cooperation between our species. And if we handle it incorrectly, then we lose the greatest opportunity for peaceful alien contact in human history. Do-hyun sat back in his chair, staring at the communication device. He had sent Minji to make first contact with an alien species. He was beginning to suspect she might be doing much more than that. Their fifth private meeting took place in a secluded part of the Crystal Gardens, where the formations grew in spirals that seemed to reach toward the stars. Queen Velnara had been quieter than usual, her forearms moving in slow, thoughtful patterns as they walked. I must tell you something, the Queen said suddenly, stopping beside a formation that chimed like distant bells. My question to you in the throne room. It was not simple curiosity. Minji waited, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. For 300 years I have ruled as my ancestors did. I accepted the mate chosen by the council. I produced the required heirs. I followed every tradition without question. The Queen's voice carried a weight that Minji had never heard before. But the mate they chose, he cared nothing for me as a person. I was simply a duty to him, as he was to me. That sounds lonely, Minji said softly. Lonely. Yes, that is the word. The Queen looked up at the alien stars. Then I discovered your broadcasts. I saw humans choosing partners who made them laugh, who understood their thoughts, who cared for them as individuals. I began to wonder, what would it feel like to be chosen for who I am, not what I am? Minji felt something shift in her understanding. This towering alien ruler, who commanded a civilization spanning multiple worlds, was asking the same questions that humans had been asking for centuries. So, when you asked if I would marry someone like you, I was asking if it was possible for someone to see past this, the Queen gestured to her imposing form, and find something worth choosing underneath. For the first time, Minji really looked at Queen Velnara, not as a diplomatic challenge or an alien ruler, but as an individual. She saw intelligence in those compound eyes, curiosity in the way she moved, gentleness in how she spoke about her people's needs. The physical differences that had seemed so important at first began to fade into the background. I think, Minji said carefully, that anyone who took the time to really know you would find a great deal worth choosing. The Queen's entire posture changed, her arms moving in what Minji now recognized as surprise and something that might have been hope. But their growing understanding wasn't happening in a vacuum. Back at the human quarters, Yuna from the Cultural Exchange team was expressing serious concerns to the rest of the diplomatic staff. The ambassador is spending too much time with the Queen, she said during their evening briefing. 4 hours a day in private meetings. This goes beyond cultural exchange. Hyunwoo nodded grimly. And it's causing problems with the Thylorian nobility. I've noticed increased security around the palace. More guards watching our movements. What kind of problems? Jiwoo asked. The kind where they start viewing us as a threat to their way of life, instead of potential allies, Yuna replied. Some of the younger Thylorians I've been working with mentioned that several noble families are concerned about the Queen's new interests. Meanwhile, in the Thylorian court, those concerns were becoming more vocal. A group of high-ranking nobles had gathered in one of the palace's private chambers, their clicking communications rapid and agitated. The Queen neglects her duties, one of them declared. She spends her time with the alien instead of attending to matters of state. Worse, added another, she speaks of concepts that threaten our very foundation. Choice in mates, individual. Desires over duty. These ideas are poison to our civilization. Kixthan, the Queen's advisor, found himself in an impossible position. His loyalty to the Queen was absolute, but his responsibility to Thylorian society was equally strong. Perhaps, he suggested carefully, we should limit the Queen's access to the humans until this phase passes. And if it doesn't pass, asked the eldest noble, what if the Queen continues down this path of rebellion against everything our people have built? The question hung in the air like a threat, while in the Crystal Gardens, two beings from different worlds continued to discover that understanding could bloom in the most unexpected places. The emergency transport ship arrived without warning, cutting through Thyloris's atmosphere like a silver blade. Minji was in the middle of her daily meeting with Queen Velnara when Hyunwoo's urgent message reached her communicator. Ambassador, you need to return to quarters immediately. We have a situation. Minji found Sunho waiting in the main briefing room, his diplomatic uniform crisp and his expression grim. She had worked with him for years back on Earth, but today he looked at her like she was a stranger. Minji, he said without any of his usual warmth, I'm here on direct orders from the Diplomatic Council. Orders? Sunho placed a sealed tablet on the table between them. Immediate recall. You're to return to Earth for debriefing and reassignment. Minji stared at the device as if it might explode. Reassignment? We're in the middle of the most important first contact in human history. That's exactly the problem. Sunho activated the tablet, showing her communication logs and reports. Your private meetings with the Queen have been flagged as a security risk. The Council believes you've become too personally involved with the alien leadership. Too personally involved? Minji's voice rose. I'm building a relationship that could ensure peace between our species, or you're jeopardizing everything we've worked for. Sunho's tone was firm but not unkind. Minji, I've seen the reports. Daily private meetings, discussions about personal matters rather than policy, emotional attachment that's affecting your judgment. Yuna stepped forward from where she'd been listening near the door. The ambassador has made remarkable progress in understanding Thylorian culture. At what cost? Sunho countered. Half the Thylorian nobility won't speak to us anymore. Their own government is becoming unstable because their queen is spending all her time with a human diplomat instead of governing her people. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Crystal Palace, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. Zorvek, the most senior of the Thylorian nobles, had gathered his allies in a chamber far from the queen's usual haunts. His massive form dominated the space as he addressed the group. The queen has lost her way, he declared, his forearms moving in aggressive patterns. She speaks of human concepts, questions our sacred traditions, and neglects her duties to our people. The assembled nobles clicked their agreement. They represented the oldest and most powerful families on Thyloris, and their patience was running thin. What do you propose? Asked one of the younger nobles. The humans must leave, Zorvek stated flatly, and the queen must remember her place. The queen will not willingly end her association with the human diplomat, another noble pointed out. Zorvek's compound eyes glittered dangerously. Then perhaps the queen needs to be reminded that she rules by the consent of the nobility, not by divine right. The chamber fell silent. What Zorvek was suggesting bordered on treason, but none of the nobles seemed shocked. They had all been thinking the same thing. Back in the human quarters, Minji was fighting the most important battle of her career. I need more time, she pleaded with Sunho. The queen is on the verge of making changes that could revolutionize both our societies, or destroy them both, Sunho replied. Minji, you're not thinking clearly. This alien queen has somehow gotten under your skin, and it's affecting your judgment. She's not just an alien queen, Minji said quietly. She's an intelligent being who's questioning everything she's been taught because she wants something better for herself and her people. Sunho studied her face carefully. You care about her? Of course I care about her. That's what makes me effective at my job. No, Minji. You care about her in a way that goes beyond professional duty. Sunho's voice was gentle now. And that's exactly why you need to come home. As if summoned by their conversation, Queen Velnara's voice echoed through the palace communication system, requesting an immediate audience with Ambassador Minji. But this time, there was something different in her tone, something that sounded like fear. The two governments were pulling their representatives apart, but the crisis brewing on Thyloris was about to make that the least of their problems. The attack came at dawn, when both the human and Thylorian delegations were preparing for what was supposed to be the final peace ceremony. Minji was reviewing her farewell speech. Sunho had given her until the end of the day to conclude her mission, when explosions rocked the Crystal Palace. "Security breach in the East Wing!" Hyunwoo's voice crackled through the communication system. "Multiple hostiles, both human and Thylorian." Minji ran toward the throne room, her heart pounding. Through the crystal corridors, she could see smoke rising from several areas of the palace. The beautiful harmonic crystals that usually sang peaceful melodies were now shrieking discordant alarms. She found Queen Velnara in the main hall, surrounded by her royal guards. The queen's forearms moved rapidly as she coordinated the defense of her palace, but Minji could see the confusion in her compound eyes. "What's happening?" Minji called out as she reached the queen's side. "Rebels," the queen replied grimly. "Both yours and mine, working together." A Thylorian guard approached, clicking rapidly. Queen Velnara's posture stiffened as she listened to the report. "Zorvek has seized the communication center," she translated for Minji. "He's broadcasting a message claiming that I have been corrupted by alien influence and must be removed for the good of our people." Before Minji could respond, Jiwoo's voice came through her communicator. "Ambassador, we've got a problem. Some of our own people are involved in this. I'm picking up human communication. Signatures coordinating with the Thylorian rebels." "Who?" Minji demanded. "I can't tell yet, but someone's been feeding information to the extremists on both sides. They know our security protocols, our meeting schedules, everything." Another explosion, this one closer. The palace shuddered, and several crystal formations cracked, their songs turning into painful wails. Queen Velnara turned to Minji. "They will try to kill us both. Dead martyrs are easier to blame than living diplomats. Then we need to stop them." Minji's diplomatic training kicked in, but this time it was focused on crisis management. "Your people know this palace better than anyone. My people understand human tactics. If we work together, you would help me? Even though your government has ordered you to leave." Minji looked at the alien queen, this being who had challenged her own society's traditions and made her question everything she thought she knew about diplomacy and connection. "Of course I'll help you." The queen's compound eyes seemed to shimmer. "Then we must reach the central communication array. If we can broadcast the truth about what's happening here, we can stop this before it becomes a war." They moved through the palace like a perfectly coordinated team. The queen's strategic mind mapped out routes that avoided the rebel strongholds, while Minji's diplomatic experience helped them navigate the complex politics of who could be trusted among the palace staff. When they encountered a group of human extremists trying to plant explosives in the main audience chamber, Minji used her knowledge of Earth military tactics to predict their movements, while the queen's understanding of palace security helped them outmaneuver the saboteurs. "There," Queen Velnara pointed to a group of mixed human and Thylorian rebels. "They're heading for the peace treaty archive. If they destroy it, the blame will fall on both our governments," Minji finished, "making future peace impossible." They reached the communication center just as Zorvek was preparing to broadcast another message. The massive Thylorian noble stood before the transmission, Array, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he spoke of the alien contamination of their queen. "Zorvek." Queen Velnara's voice rang out across the chamber. The noble turned, his compound eyes showing no surprise at their arrival. "My queen, or should I say former queen, your obsession with these aliens has made you unfit to rule. My friendship with the humans has shown me what we could become," the queen replied steadily. "A species that chooses cooperation over fear." The standoff lasted only seconds before Sunho appeared from behind a communication console, his diplomatic sidearm drawn and trained on Minji. "I'm sorry it's come to this," he said. The aftermath of the attempted sabotage changed everything. When the dust settled and the rebels were arrested, both governments found themselves in an impossible position. The extremists had been exposed as working together, proving that fear and hatred could unite across species lines just as easily as understanding could. 3 weeks later, an unprecedented joint session was called. For the first time in history, human and Thylorian leaders would meet in the same room to address the crisis that had nearly destroyed their first contact. The Great Assembly Hall on Thyloris had been modified to accommodate both species. Human seating areas were arranged alongside Thylorian platforms, and translation systems hummed quietly throughout the space. Representatives from Earth's government sat across from the Thylorian nobility, while Queen Velnara and Minji found themselves at the center of attention. "The question before us," announced the session moderator, a neutral AI system that both species had agreed upon, "is how to proceed." In light of recent events, Do-hyun, who had traveled from Earth specifically for this session, stood to address the assembly. "The human government acknowledges that extremist elements within our own ranks participated in this attack. However, we maintain that Ambassador Minji's personal involvement with the Thylorian Queen created the instability that these extremists exploited. Zorvek, despite his role in the rebellion, had been granted speaking rights due to his status in Thylorian society. The corruption of our queen by alien concepts threatens the very foundation of our civilization. Traditional Thylorian values must be preserved." The debate went on for hours. Some speakers called for an immediate end to all human Thylorian contact. Others suggested starting over with entirely new diplomatic teams. Through it all, Minji remained silent, knowing that her moment to speak would come. Finally, Queen Velnara rose from her platform. The hall fell quiet as she approached the center of the room, her forearms moving in formal patterns. "I have listened to fears about corruption and contamination," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "But I have seen something different. I have seen what happens when two very different beings choose to understand each other rather than fear each other." She turned to face Minji directly. "3 months ago, I asked you a question that shocked both our peoples. Today, I ask it again, but this time in front of everyone who will determine our future." The Queen's compound eyes focused on Minji with an intensity that seemed to cut through all the political noise around them. "Human diplomat Minji," she said formally, "would you marry someone like me?" The hall erupted in clicking sounds from the Thylorians and startled murmurs from the humans. But Minji heard only the question, the same question that had started everything, now asked in front of 2 worlds. She stood slowly, looking around at the assembled representatives. These people would decide whether her answer led to war or peace, to separation or cooperation. "Your Majesty," Minji said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "my answer is yes, but only if you'd marry someone like me." The reaction was immediate and intense. Some representatives looked shocked, others angry, still others thoughtful. "But," Minji continued, raising her voice to be heard over the commotion, "I propose something more than a personal union. I propose a diplomatic union, the first interspecies partnership designed to bridge our worlds permanently." Queen Velnara's arms moved in what Minji now recognized as surprise and hope. "What are you suggesting?" "A joint embassy, a shared space where our peoples can learn from each other, where the understanding we've built can become the foundation for something larger." From the human delegation, Hanil from the legal team stood up. "That would require creating entirely new frameworks of international law. The legal precedents alone would be revolutionary," finished Somin, another legal expert who had been quietly working on theoretical interspecies legislation. "But not impossible." Do-hyun looked stunned. "You're talking about rewriting the basic principles of diplomacy." "Yes," Minji replied simply. "Because the old principles aren't adequate for the universe we're living in now." The vote, when it finally came 6 hours later, was closer than anyone expected, but it passed. 6 months later, the crystal gardens of Thyloris had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. Flowers from Earth grew alongside luminescent Thylorian formations, creating a garden that belonged to both worlds and neither. Representatives from dozens of species had traveled across the galaxy to witness what many were calling the wedding of the century. Minji stood before a mirror in her preparation chamber, adjusting the unique dress that had been designed for this day. Half of it was made from earth silk in traditional white, while the other half incorporated Thylorian crystal fibers that shifted colors in the light. The combination should have looked strange, but instead it seemed perfect. Two different elements, creating something beautiful together. "You ready for this?" Jiwoo asked, entering the room with a smile. She had been appointed as Minji's official translator for the ceremony, though both bride and groom had become fluent in each other's languages over the past months. "As ready as anyone can be for making history," Minji replied, smoothing her dress nervously. In another chamber across the palace, Queen Velnara was undergoing her own preparations. Thylorian wedding traditions involved intricate body paintings that told the story of the union, and today's paintings were unlike any that had been created before. They showed the meeting of two worlds, the bridging of differences, and the hope for a shared future. The ceremony took place in the main hall, which had been redesigned to accommodate both species' customs. Jiho, Earth's senior diplomatic official, stood on one side of the altar alongside High Priest Melthis, whose crystalline robes chimed softly with each movement. "Today," Jiho began, "we witnessed something that our ancestors could never have imagined. A union that spans not just two hearts, but two worlds." Melthis continued in the clicking language of the Thylorians, his words translated for the human. "Guests, in the ancient traditions of our people, marriage is the joining of paths that were meant to walk together. Today we see that some paths cross the very stars to find each other." When the couple exchanged vows, they spoke in both languages, their words overlapping and harmonizing in a way that moved many in the audience to tears. Minji's promise to love across all differences was echoed by Queen Velnara's pledge to choose understanding over fear in all things. The rings they exchanged were works of art in themselves, human gold embedded with Thylorian crystals that would pulse with light whenever the couple was near each other, a symbol of connection that could bridge any distance. But it was after the ceremony that the real work began. The joint embassy they had proposed was more than just a symbolic gesture. It was a functioning diplomatic center where the best minds from both species worked together on challenges that neither could solve alone. Within the first year, the East Embassy had mediated 3 separate conflicts between other alien species, established trade relationships that benefited dozens of worlds, and created cultural exchange programs that were changing how different species understood each other. Minji often found herself working late into the night in the embassy's main office, a space that perfectly reflected their partnership. Her human-designed desk sat across from Queen Velnara's Thylorian work platform, and the walls displayed art from both their worlds, alongside contributions from the many species they now worked with. "Do you ever regret it?" the Queen asked one evening as they reviewed applications from 3 new species requesting diplomatic assistance. "Regret what?" "Giving up your old life, your career advancement on Earth, the simple path." Minji looked around their shared office, then at her partner, this magnificent being who had changed her understanding of what was possible in the universe. "Never," she said simply. "The simple path wouldn't have led us here." Queen Velnara's compound eyes shimmered in what Minji had learned was the Thylorian equivalent of a smile. "Here is good. Here is perfect." Outside their window, ships from dozens of worlds came and went from the embassy's landing bays. Each one carried diplomats, traders, artists, and dreamers who had heard about the place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. The question that had started it all, "Would you marry someone like me?" had become something much larger. It had become proof that the greatest adventures in life began with the courage to reach across any divide and find the common ground that connected all thinking beings. Their love story had become the foundation for a new kind of diplomacy, one that understood that the universe was vast enough for all its differences and wonderful enough to celebrate them all.